Someone here recently asked me whether or not we have choices. It was last week, maybe. Yes. And I answered that Buddhism doesn't ignore the relative world and that making choices are part of it. One choice that everyone here must have made is whether or not to begin and then to continue doing meditation. That was a choice. What I didn't say is that choosing is problematic, however, and that's today's topic. People in the US can be very particular about being given choices. When Jane and I were guests of someone's house in Japan, we would be brought something to drink without being asked whether or not we wanted anything or how we would like it if we did. Here, having choices seems to give a way for people to protect their sense of personal freedom. Indeed, wanting to decide for themselves is a common reason for someone not wanting to get vaccinated for COVID, for example. Behind people holding to concepts such as expressed in "no one can tell me what to do" seems to be a belief that their choices make them who they are, or at least to themselves. Certainly, the need to have choices won't be questioned by those likely to insist on their rights like this. A Chan or Zen critique of having preferences was given early on by the third Chinese ancestor, Kanchi Sosan, in his poem Xin Xin Mei, Faith in Mind. Its first stanza is, I'll read it twice, "The perfect way knows no difficulties, except that it refuses to make preferences. Only when free from hate and love, it reveals itself fully and without disguise. That is the perfect way." In other words, back to me here, in other words, personal likes and dislikes are what keep us from our true nature, as it can only be experienced when such preferences are no longer of importance. Even the slightest discrimination of either attraction or repulsion leaves us bound to the relative world where the self reigns. Though the problem is less in having preferences than in our attachment to such choices. Someone may prefer chocolate ice cream, but it shouldn't matter if it isn't available. By turning vanilla down because of being fond only of chocolate, one limits one's experience by following some idea about who one thinks one is. Lovers of chocolate ice cream who would never stoop to eating any other flavor may be that due only to having an image of themselves that they want to preserve. While the above may sound harmless, we all have a seemingly infinite collection of previous choices that we rely on to define oneself. Trungpa Rinpoche said that this self has two sides. In the sentence, "I am," one side of the self is the I one, and the other is the am self. An example of the latter being our feelings of being alive, of existence. We first become more aware of the I self in practice through noticing how addicted we are to what we like and don't like. But we shouldn't think that we can quickly make changes to our habitual ways merely by observing this I self. Such a conclusion would provide only a perfect illustration of the use of the phrase "easier said than done." But changing takes time. But noticing what is happening with the I self does allow us chances to laugh at ourselves about the cheekiness of our me, which once it stops desiring one thing, quickly desires another. Likewise, our life also will end, and so we cannot be said to have a permanent self. We come to see as well that we and everyone else are insubstantial. That is, nobody or anything has any substance to it. This nothing to us, you might say, and therefore there is no am. Water may have waves, but there isn't any water either. For us to be both impermanent, like waves, and insubstantial, like water, is to be completely empty of self. Accordingly, rather than living by doing by what they want to or by not doing what they don't want to, bodhisattvas do what there is to be done in the world around them, focusing not on the self, but on whoever or whatever needs taking care of. While for bodhisattvas to consider that there is something special about being a bodhisattva, that would telegraph a return to this I self. A result of bodhisattvas leaving behind things that are limiting is their being open to everything. Bodhisattvas face each moment without anything in mind. The words, I don't know, represent this mind. Instead of predetermined thoughts, prajna, which can be translated insight or superior knowledge, is there. It is not knowing this or that, but simply knowing, Trungpa said. Okay, thank you. May I turn the screen here for Jane? Okay. You may not have noticed, but the schedule, particularly for the Zazenkai in my case, has been changed to just 30 minutes. So I have spoken for, anyway, 13 minutes. I got 13 minutes left. Chris, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so I remember hearing, in the story of Bodhidharma meeting the emperor, it finishes with him saying, the emperor says, well, and who's standing in front of me? And he says, don't know. And then he walks away. And also, I've heard that one of Sung San's in the Korean masters sort of big thing was only don't know. So I'm curious, are these the same sort of don't know that you were just talking about? And could you elaborate a little bit on what you're talking about when you're saying this don't know concept?
I guess you're right, Chris. Both of those are good examples of don't know. We, of course, right now, even when I'm talking to you right now, I'm using discrimination, of course. But I'm talking about the Dharma, which is supposed to be not discriminating, but of course, what I'm doing is discriminating. And the Dharma itself is, in fact, discrimination. But in the case of Soto Zen, and in the case of the example you gave of Bodhidharma meeting the emperor, or the southern emperor, and of the Korean teacher, that's exactly right. Until we are exactly in a situation, so I use the word predetermined, our thinking, what's in our memory, all of our mind, those are things that have happened before. They're predetermined. You've already put a sign up before you built the house. So therefore, when you truly are just being there, you know something, but not until the moment of knowing. Until the situation occurs, it's for the first time and the only time, and that's when you know. And so therefore, to repeat what I previously said, Trungpa, who of course, you don't know who he is probably, but he's a founder of Shambhala. He was a kind of wild guy, and but Suzuki Roshi liked him very much, so I respect him also. Not because of that, but because I like his writings, even though he's a Vajrayana teacher rather than a Zen teacher. So he put the same problem about prajna. What is prajna? The Prajna Paramita Sutra. That's what the Heart Sutra is all about. It's not about heart. It's about prajna. So therefore, we don't have to worry about being able to discriminate. In a situation, you will know.
So there's knowing as like an active verb of which sort of refers to kind of like the on purpose thinking that we're meant to avoid when we're practicing zazen, where we're coming up with and maintaining stories about things, sort of on purpose, actively, and then there's knowing in the sense of like actually experiencing, where that form of knowledge only exists in a moment where someone is, non-discriminatory and just fully living in the situation that they are currently in.
Yes, and a kind of a caveat here is that prajna is actually something that is about the relative world, but in the relative world in that sense, Chris. Yes, good, good, good. Just yeah. Oh, Mike did. Okay, Mike, you're next, and then Matt.
Real quickly, in your discussion of choices, in another way, are you saying that we shouldn't be attached to the desire of the outcome of our choices? We just choose depending on the situation and the circumstances, and if it doesn't work out that way, okay, we move on. And is that what, because we need to make choices in day-to-day life, but we shouldn't become attached to them, like you say, ice cream. Okay, I can't get this flavor of ice cream, go storming out of the ice cream parlor and say, these people are ripping me off and stuff. We just say, okay, fine, and we move on. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Matt?
Yeah, couple of things. If you could elaborate a little bit on the notion of on purpose, which Chris mentioned. And fortunately, I guess for the people present, maybe that I'm too sleepy to think of my other question now. So I'll leave it at that.
What did Chris say about purpose? I kind of.
Oh, if you could elaborate on the notion of on purpose, doing things on purpose, thinking on purpose, planning on purpose. Chris mentioned this, thinking on purpose versus what we do in meditation, which is to, ideally just to have the thoughts arise and observe them until they pass. So.
That's okay. Of course, on purpose goes with my first sentence in my talk, which was that someone said, no, my answer to the question about do we have choices is that of course we do, right? And those things are that's probably a definition. That's we do something we do something on purpose. There's nothing wrong with doing something on purpose. So we're not trying to replicate zazen during our ordinary life.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is, when you say, of course, we do something on purpose, but isn't that going to be determined on our desire or our aversion to an action, to an object that we are desirous of or averse to?
That's true. Yes, that's true also. Where are you hoping I will go?
Oh, no, I'm just saying, even it strikes me that even in the relative world, there aren't choices. I mean, you can call them choices, but you know, there are options, but it's not as if we are selecting options based on any kind of freedom. That's what I have observed. That's what I have observed.
Sure.
Not when I say I observed it, this is not a conclusion based on thought per se. This is a conclusion based on observation, which I'm articulating through words.
Okay. I have nothing to add to that, but it seems right. Jane's hand is up
I
here.
wanted to say something on this, Matt, is that, yes, when we make our choices, we often move on a revulsion and a desire for things in an unconscious way. But our purpose in this whole practice, whether it's in the relative world or sitting on the cushion, practicing counting our breaths and stuff, that most of the time we're moved by an unconscious urge to do something. I want chocolate, only chocolate, or I only want vanilla, etc. But when we see it, because we're trying to become aware of our unconscious moves and unconscious urges, when that happens, we just note it and maybe at some point go against it. In that sense, we're bringing up real choice by trying to change what we move on unconsciously most of the time. And so we're trying to make conscious all of our natural aversions and desires of things so that we know that this is us, and therefore when we do make a choice, we at least have more information about how we're making it, and we pay more attention to actually making it.
But doesn't that mean that we have a new aversion? That what you described was we go against it because of the because of is we're acting as a result of a new aversion. It strikes me.
Well, that may be for a while, but if we're really paying attention to what we're doing, then little by little we start shaving off the unconsciousness of it, and we start being much more aware of what we're doing, and then in a state of awareness we can make a choice. I think our lack of ability to make a real choice is almost always from our unconscious motives rather than from our real choices. But when we actually become aware of what we're doing, we're less likely to move on an unconscious urge than we are usually. That's my point.
Good point, yes. Sandy's next here. These are the last three, last three people here. Sandy's first, and then Chris, and then Mark.
Your talk, Peter, thank you. It was very good. It brought up something from when one of the, probably after I've been practicing about a year or so. I remember sitting at the table with Jane and you and all the people participating that day. And we were in a discussion about if you're vegetarian, but you're only offered something with meat in it. And you had said, you had brought up an experience you had, Jane, that you were in that experience and you would eat the meat.
Actually, what happened was the meat was served to me without even asking. It was just given to
Right,
me. And I realized once that it had to be thrown away otherwise.
right. But you made that decision
Yeah, in that case, I did. Yeah.
in that moment. And to me, that's prajna, making that decision based on your feelings, your understanding of the implications of not eating the meat.
Yeah, once upon a time, there was two Suzuki Roshi stories. One is one you've heard before here, and that is that when he and his driver or a few people were going down to Tassajara, which is 4.5 hours from San Francisco, they would stop and have some lunch or something. Usually, often have ice cream actually. And one of his students was a severe person about diet, and so he ordered something like toasted cheese or something, or salad, and Suzuki Roshi ordered a hamburger. And then Jane, I think was actually for the story. He was there actually.
No, I wasn't there, but
Okay.
I did hear this one too.
And Suzuki Roshi took his hamburger and he gave it to the person who ordered the salad, and he took the salad.
Yeah, he did.
Another story, which is that by some very nice fortunate chance, I visited Suzuki Roshi when he was when he was back in Japan, and I didn't know he was going to be at his temple, but I went there and there he was. Anyway, the next day they cooked breakfast for me, and they cooked me a Western breakfast, which had ham and fried eggs. But the whole shebang was horribly overcooked. And I ate mine, and then Suzuki Roshi offered me the other one. I said, no, thank you. And he said, no, here it is.
You could not have any crazy ideas about food.
Yeah. Chris?
So I think you could probably do a whole talk on Dharma is, discriminates, because that's kind of a counterintuitive concept, but it does make sense when you presented it just now. Yeah, I wanted to share two things, or maybe just one. Oh yeah, so one thing I had heard from the cognitive psychology world is that the aspect of decision making that we are conscious of is really just us justifying something that's actually already been done below the surface, and that is deeply unsettling. Just because I take a lot of comfort, or maybe I'm fooling myself, but I feel a lot more comfortable with the notion that I have free will and I make decisions on purpose, and et cetera, et cetera. Although a quote I heard attributed to Reb Anderson is, you don't actually ever make decisions, you have thoughts and you do things. And that seems to resonate, even though it does kind of make me, again, feel a little bit robbed of agency. But the other thing that Jane made me think of was a funny quote I saw on the internet, because it's the opposite of what she just said. And that is, I've decided to be less self-aware. What I do is none of my business.
That's a mine. And Mark, your last?
Make it very short. I like what you said about Trumpa Ricochet and the I am.
Mhm.
And I think what part of what you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can elaborate on that very quickly, is that we callously are always rehearsing ourselves with our likes and dislikes. We're always constantly reminding ourselves, and others too, of this personality that we have. Almost feel like we're trying to convince ourselves, this is who I really am. I'm the person that loves cheese, or the person who hates the sun, or something, or I only drink milkshakes with chocolate, right? So I think, is that what he's hinting at?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I think I was doing more than hinting. I think that's just what I was saying. Which is very accurate. That's very accurate.